I stood frozen in my own living room while Victoria shoved a property transfer document into my trembling hands. "Sign it, Meryl. You know this house should be mine now that Michael's gone," she said, with that cold smile I'd grown to hate. My grip tightened on my late son's photo, his warm brown eyes staring back at me as my heart shattered all over again. I felt everyone's eyes burning into me. Victoria's friends sat on my couch like vultures, nodding along with her lawyer, who tapped his expensive pen against his briefcase. The weight of their stares made my cheeks burn with shame. I wanted to scream, to throw them all out, but my voice caught in my throat. "I'll think about it," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. Inside, I was screaming. This was my home, the place where I'd raised Michael alone after his father died, where I'd kissed his scraped knees and celebrated his first steps. Victoria had no right to demand it from me, but there she stood, acting like she owned everything that had ever mattered to me. The silence stretched until Victoria's laugh cut through it like glass. "My name is Meryl, and I lost everything the day my son died. Michael had been my whole world since I became a widow at 28. I worked double shifts at the diner just to keep our house, watching him grow from a shy boy into a kind, gentle man who could fix anything with his hands. When he brought Victoria home 3 years ago, I tried so hard to love her. She was beautiful, confident, everything I thought Michael deserved. But something about the way she looked at our modest home, like it was beneath her, made my stomach twist. Still, Michael's face lit up when he talked about her, so I swallowed my doubts. The wedding was small but perfect. Michael wore his father's suit, and Victoria glowed in white silk that cost more than I made in 2 months. I cried happy tears, believing my son had found his soulmate. When they moved into their apartment across town, I thought Victoria would soften toward me over time. Then Michael's accident happened. A drunk driver ran a red light, and my world collapsed in an instant. At the funeral, Victoria cried beautifully for the cameras, but I caught her checking her phone during the service. 2 weeks after we buried Michael, Victoria appeared on my doorstep with suitcases and her 5-year-old daughter Emma from her first marriage. "I can't afford rent right now," she said, tears streaming down her perfect face. "Just for a few weeks until I get back on my feet. Please, Meryl. Emma needs stability right now." My heart broke seeing that little girl clutching her stuffed rabbit. Emma had always been sweet to me, calling me Grandma Meryl, even though we weren't blood-related. How could I turn them away when they needed help? Michael would have wanted me to take care of his family. "Of course you can stay," I said, opening my door wider. "Stay as long as you need." Victoria's tears dried up the moment she stepped inside. Within hours, she was rearranging my furniture like she owned the place. She moved my reading chair to make room for her expensive exercise equipment. She threw out my favorite coffee mugs because they didn't match her aesthetic. "This place needs updating," she announced, tossing my grandmother's doilies into the trash. No wonder Michael wanted to renovate before he died. That was a lie. Michael loved this house exactly as it was. 3 days later, I came home from grocery shopping to find Michael's childhood baseball trophies in the garbage bin outside. My hands shook as I rescued each one, wiping off coffee grounds and potato peels. These weren't just objects, they were memories of Saturday mornings cheering from the bleachers, of Michael's proud smile when he hit his first home run. "They're just clutter, Meryl," Victoria said when I confronted her. "This house needs to feel like a real home for Emma now, not some shrine to the past. You're being dramatic." I clutched the trophies to my chest, fighting back tears. These were Michael's. He would want them kept safe. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Michael's dead. He doesn't want anything anymore. You need to accept that and move forward." Her words hit me like physical blows. How could she be so cruel about the man she'd promised to love forever? I quietly carried the trophies to my bedroom, arranging them on my dresser where Victoria couldn't touch them. But the damage was done. I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around someone who treated me like an unwelcome guest. The humiliation burned in my chest, but I stayed silent. For Emma's sake, I told myself. A week later, Victoria hosted a dinner party without asking me. She invited her friends and some distant relatives, serving wine on my good china while I hid in the kitchen like hired help. Through the doorway, I heard her holding court at my dining room table. "Meryl's getting too old to maintain a house this size," she announced loudly. "Don't you all think she'd be happier in a nice assisted living facility? This place needs a younger family." The guests murmured agreement. Someone suggested I could use the money from selling to enjoy my golden years. Another voice chimed in about how generous Victoria was to take care of me. I pressed my back against the kitchen wall, heat crawling up my neck as they discussed my future like I wasn't even there. Victoria's voice rose above the others. "I've been trying to convince her to sign the house over to me. It's what Michael would have wanted, keeping it in the family for Emma's future." Laughter filled my dining room. They were laughing at me, the foolish old woman who didn't know what was best for herself. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, forcing myself to stay hidden instead of defending myself. Victoria had no idea who she was underestimating. That night, alone in my bedroom, I stared at Michael's photo on my nightstand. "I won't let her destroy everything you loved," I whispered to his smiling face. "I promise you that, son." Something shifted inside me. The grief and shock that had clouded my mind since Michael's death began to clear, replaced by a cold, steady fury. Victoria thought I was weak, broken by loss. She saw an easy target, a grieving mother too devastated to fight back. She was wrong. I'd survived poverty, widowhood, and raising a child alone while working 2 jobs. I'd fought insurance companies and bill collectors and landlords who tried to push me around. Victoria's beauty and manipulation tactics might work on others, but I'd seen her type before. I pulled out a notebook and began writing down everything I'd noticed about Victoria's behavior since she'd moved in. The lies she told her friends, the way she spent money she claimed not to have, the phone calls she took in hushed tones. If Victoria wanted to play games, I'd show her how a real survivor fights back. But I'd be smart about it, patient, strategic. The best revenge would be letting her destroy herself. The next morning, I accidentally intercepted a letter addressed to Victoria. My hands trembled as I read the bright red warnings from credit card companies. Thousands of dollars in unpaid debt, final notices, threats of legal action. Victoria snatched the letter away when she saw me holding it, her face pale beneath her makeup. "That's private mail," she snapped. "You had no right to open it." "I'm sorry," I said meekly. "I thought it might be important. Bills can be so overwhelming when you're grieving." She forced a laugh, but I saw fear flicker in her eyes. "It's just a misunderstanding with the credit card company. I'll handle it." I smiled sympathetically, pretending not to notice how her hands shook as she shoved the letter into her purse. "Of course, dear. I understand how stressful money troubles can be." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was Victoria, demanding my house because she was supposedly thinking of Emma's future, while drowning in debt she couldn't pay. If she was this desperate for money, what else was she hiding? I decided to find out. But first, I needed to document everything carefully. I had a feeling I'd need proof later. 2 days later, while Victoria was out shopping with Emma, I found crumpled papers in her wastebasket. My heart pounded as I smoothed them out on my kitchen table. There it was, a practice sheet with my signature traced over and over in Victoria's handwriting. She was trying to forge my name. I took photos with my phone, making sure the lighting was clear. Then I carefully put the papers back exactly where I'd found them. Victoria was planning something illegal, but she still saw me as too naive to catch on. Perfect. Let her think I was clueless while I gathered evidence. That afternoon, I called my old friend Helen, who worked at the bank. "Just checking," I said casually, "but if someone tried to forge my signature on important documents, you'd catch that, right?" "Oh, absolutely," Helen said. "We have samples of your signature going back 30 years. Any forgery would be spotted immediately and we'd call the police." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Victoria was digging her own grave, one forged signature at a time. I just needed to be patient and let her keep digging. The trap was starting to take shape in my mind. I began inviting Victoria's friends over for coffee when she was out running errands. These were the same women who'd sat in my living room agreeing that I should give up my house. But one-on-one, away from Victoria's influence, they were surprisingly easy to talk to. "I'm so worried about Victoria," I'd say with genuine concern. She seems so stressed about money lately. I found her crying over some bills yesterday. Their eyes would widen with interest. Victoria had always presented herself as financially secure to her social circle. The idea that she might be struggling was clearly news to them. And the drinking, I'd add sadly. I understand she's grieving, but Emma shouldn't see her mother like that every night. This wasn't entirely true. Victoria had wine with dinner most nights, but she wasn't falling down drunk. But combined with the debt problems, it painted a picture of someone whose life was falling apart. I watched doubt creep into their expressions. Victoria's perfect facade was cracking, and she didn't even know it yet. Her own friends were starting to question whether she was the victim she claimed to be. The most important ally I won was someone Victoria never expected me to contact. I found Victoria's mother, Patricia's phone number, in an old Christmas card. They'd been estranged for years over some family drama Victoria never fully explained. Patricia lived 2 hours away and had never met Emma, her own granddaughter. "Patricia," I said when she answered, "this is Meryl, Michael's mother. I hope you don't mind me calling." There was a long pause. "Is everything all right? How's Victoria holding up?" I chose my words carefully. "That's why I'm calling. I'm worried about her. And about Emma. I thought maybe you'd want to know your granddaughter." Patricia's voice softened. "I've wanted to meet Emma for years, but Victoria, well, you probably know how stubborn she can be." Over the next hour, I painted a picture of Victoria's current situation. The debt, the drinking, the increasingly erratic behavior. I didn't lie, but I emphasized the parts that made Victoria look unstable. "She's trying to convince me to sign over my house," I said finally. "Claims it's for Emma's future, but I found her practicing my signature. I'm scared she's going to do something desperate." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "I'll drive down this weekend," she said firmly. "It's time I met my granddaughter." I smiled. Victoria was about to get a very unwelcome surprise. I started acting extra submissive around Victoria, asking permission for things in my own house. "Would it be all right if I invited my friend Helen over for tea?" I'd ask meekly. "I don't want to disturb you and Emma." Victoria loved it. She practically glowed with power, waving her hand dismissively. "Of course you can have your little friends over. Just keep it quiet. Emma needs her rest." The more I played the part of the confused, helpless old woman, the bolder Victoria became. She started talking openly about her plans for the house, discussing renovations and improvements like she already owned it. "Once the paperwork is finalized," she told her friend Ashley over lunch, "I'm thinking of knocking out that wall between the kitchen and living room. Open concept is so much more modern." I pretended to be napping on the couch, but my phone was recording every word. Victoria was so confident I wouldn't fight back that she'd stop being careful about what she said around me. "The old woman won't last much longer anyway," she continued. "All this grief is aging her fast. She'll probably thank me for taking care of everything." I kept my breathing steady and my eyes closed, but inside I was burning with rage. She was already planning my funeral while stealing my home. The breakthrough came during another of Victoria's dinner parties. She'd been drinking wine all evening, becoming louder and more careless with each glass. I served appetizers quietly, invisible as always, while she entertained her guests with stories about her difficult mother-in-law. "Meryl keeps clinging to this house like it's some kind of shrine," Victoria laughed, gesturing broadly with her wine glass. "But once I get her to sign it over, I'll sell it for at least 400,000, maybe more if I stage it right." Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. Someone cleared their throat. Victoria didn't notice their reaction. "I already have a realtor lined up. She says the market is perfect for a quick sale. I could have the money in my account within 60 days. My heart pounded as I held my phone steady behind the kitchen doorway, capturing every word. This wasn't about Emma's future or keeping the house in the family. Victoria planned to sell my home and pocket the money, leaving her stepdaughter with nothing but lies. "What about Meryl?" Ashley asked quietly. "Where will she go?" Victoria shrugged. "Not my problem. She's got savings, Social Security. She'll figure it out." I had everything I needed now. Victoria had confessed her real plan in front of witnesses, and I had it all on video. Patricia arrived that Saturday morning, like an avenging angel. She was a small woman in her 60s, but she carried herself with the authority of someone who'd raised 5 children and wasn't intimidated by anyone. Victoria's face went white when she opened the door. "What are you doing here?" "Meeting my granddaughter," Patricia said calmly, stepping inside without invitation. "Meryl called me. We had a very interesting conversation." Victoria shot me a look full of venom, but I just smiled innocently. I thought Emma should know her grandmother. Emma peeked around the corner, curious about the visitor. Patricia's stern expression melted when she saw the little girl. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm your Grandma Patricia." Within minutes, Emma was chattering happily, showing Patricia her drawings and favorite toys. Victoria stood frozen, watching her carefully constructed world start to crumble. "We need to talk," Patricia told Victoria quietly, "about Emma's living situation, about your drinking, about the debts Meryl mentioned." "Meryl's been lying to you," Victoria hissed. "She's trying to turn you against me." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Really? Then you won't mind showing me those credit card statements she mentioned, or explaining why you're pressuring her to sign over her house?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That evening, I decided it was time to host my own dinner party. I invited Patricia, Helen from the bank, Victoria's friends Ashley and Melissa, and my neighbor Carlos, who'd watched Victoria's behavior with growing concern. Victoria tried to object, but I'd already set the table and prepared the meal. "It's just a small gathering," I said sweetly. "I thought everyone should get to know each other better." The dining room felt tense as we ate. Victoria kept shooting me suspicious glances, but I maintained my harmless old lady act. Finally, after dessert was served, I stood up slowly. "Before we finish tonight, I wanted to address something that's been troubling me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria relaxed slightly. She was used to my meek tone. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "Victoria, you've been so kind to help me understand what's best for my future. I thought everyone should hear your thoughtful advice." Victoria's eyes widened as I pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. "Once I get her to sign it over, I'll sell it for at least $400,000. Maybe more if I stage it right." The silence was deafening. "That's taken out of context," Victoria stammered, her face flushing red. I was hypothetically discussing $400,000, Patricia interrupted coldly. "For a house you told me was worthless and too much work for Meryl to maintain." Ashley and Melissa stared at Victoria in shock. They'd believed her sob story about wanting to preserve the family home for Emma. Now they realized they'd been used as props in her manipulation game. "You lied to us," Melissa said quietly. "You made us think Meryl was being stubborn about giving Emma a stable home." "I wasn't lying," Victoria protested. "The money would go toward Emma's future." Helen laughed bitterly. "What money? Meryl showed me your credit card statements. You're drowning in debt. That $400,000 would disappear into your creditors' pockets before Emma saw a penny." Victoria's carefully constructed image was disintegrating in real time. Her friends were looking at her like they'd never seen her before, seeing the greedy, manipulative woman I'd known she was all along. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one more surprise for Victoria. I calmly walked to my china cabinet and pulled out a manila folder. "Since we're being honest tonight, I thought I should share something else." Victoria's eyes darted to the folder, like it contained a live snake. "These are photocopies of forged signatures," I said, spreading the papers across the table. "Someone has been practicing my handwriting. I wonder who could have done such a thing." Patricia picked up one of the papers, comparing the trace signatures to the sample of my real handwriting I'd included. "This is a crime, Victoria. Identity theft, fraud. I wasn't going to." Victoria's voice cracked as she realized the trap had finally snapped shut around her. Carlos leaned forward, his expression grim. "I saw you throwing papers away last week. Now I understand why you were being so secretive." Ashley stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I can't be part of this." "Victoria, I thought you were grieving and confused, but this is criminal." One by one, Victoria's friends made excuses and left. They wanted no association with someone who would forge documents to steal from a grieving mother. Victoria sat alone at my dining room table, tears streaming down her face, while Patricia and I watched her world collapse. I've already contacted my lawyer, I said quietly, pulling out another document. This is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Victoria's head snapped up. You can't do that. Emma needs stability. I'm family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Patricia said sharply. Family doesn't forge signatures or lie to friends. You're not the woman I raised. And you're certainly not the daughter-in-law Michael thought he was marrying, I added. He would be ashamed of what you've become. Victoria lunged across the table, grabbing for the eviction papers. You vindictive old witch, you've ruined everything. Michael would hate you for this. Patricia caught Victoria's wrist before she could reach the documents. Enough. You're scaring Emma. She can hear you screaming from upstairs. That stopped Victoria cold. For all her faults, she did love her daughter. The thought of Emma witnessing her breakdown seemed to drain the fight out of her. This isn't over, she whispered, but we all knew it was. She had no money, no friends, and no legal claim to my house. Her mother had seen through her lies, and even her daughter was upstairs hiding from her anger. Victoria had lost everything, and she'd done it to herself. The next morning, Victoria began packing in silence. She moved through the house like a ghost, stuffing her expensive clothes into suitcases while Emma watched anxiously from the doorway. Where are we going, Mommy? Emma asked in a small voice. Victoria's composure cracked. I don't know, baby. Maybe we'll stay with Grandma Patricia for a while. Patricia had already made it clear that Victoria was welcome in her home, only if she got professional help for her drinking and spending problems. There would be no more enabling, no more excuses. I found Emma sitting on her bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Am I in trouble, Grandma Merrill? She whispered. My heart broke. This innocent child was paying the price for her mother's greed. No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble at all. Sometimes adults make bad choices, but that's not your fault. Will I still see you? I hugged her tight. Your Grandma Patricia and I have already talked about that. You'll visit me every weekend if you want to. This will always be your home, too. Emma smiled through her tears, and I felt some of the anger in my chest ease. Victoria might have tried to destroy my family, but Emma would always be part of it. 3 days later, Victoria loaded her car with the last of her belongings. Neighbors watched from their windows as she struggled with overstuffed suitcases, her perfect facade finally gone. No makeup, hair unwashed, wearing the same clothes she'd slept in. She paused at the front door, looking back at the house she'd tried so hard to steal. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She'd had everything: a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, a family who would have supported her through her grief. But greed had poisoned her heart. She'd seen Michael's death as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. She'd calculated how much money she could squeeze from her mother-in-law's pain. This should have been mine, she said bitterly as she passed me on the porch. It was never yours to take, I replied calmly. Michael built this family with love, not lies. Victoria got in her car without another word. I watched her drive away, feeling nothing but relief. My home was safe. Emma would be raised by someone who truly loved her, and Michael's memory would no longer be tainted by Victoria's presence. The house felt peaceful for the first time in months. That weekend, Patricia brought Emma for her first official visit. The little girl ran into my arms, laughing as I spun her around in the front yard. We spent the afternoon baking cookies and reading stories, the house filled with joy again. Mommy's been crying a lot, Emma confided as we decorated sugar cookies with pink frosting. She says mean things about you, but I don't believe her. You're not mean. I smoothed her hair gently. Your mommy is very sad right now. Sometimes when people are sad, they say things they don't really mean. It was a kinder explanation than Victoria deserved, but Emma didn't need to know the whole ugly truth. She was too young to understand her mother's betrayal. All she needed to know was that she was loved and safe. I set up Emma's old room with fresh sheets and her favorite books. Patricia had agreed that Emma could spend every weekend with me, giving Victoria time to get her life together while ensuring Emma maintained stability. Looking at Emma's bright smile as she arranged her stuffed animals on the bed, I felt like I finally had my family back. Not the way I'd planned, but better than I dared hope after losing Michael. Word of Victoria's downfall spread quickly through her social circle. Ashley called me a few days later, full of apologies for how they'd treated me at that first dinner party. "We had no idea what she was really planning," Ashley said. "She made it sound like you were being unreasonable, holding on to a house you couldn't maintain." "She's lost her job," Melissa added when she called later. "Apparently someone from the dinner party mentioned the debt and drinking to her boss. They decided she wasn't reliable enough for client relations." I hadn't intended for Victoria to lose her job, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She'd been willing to make me homeless for money. Now, she was facing the consequences of her choices. Her friends had completely cut ties with her. The perfect image she'd worked so hard to maintain was shattered beyond repair. She'd isolated herself through her own greed and dishonesty. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding relationships with the neighbors Victoria had convinced I was becoming senile. They stopped by to check on me, relieved to see I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my home. 2 weeks after Victoria left, a young man in an expensive suit knocked on my door. He introduced himself as a real estate agent and explained that Victoria had hired him to list my house. "There seems to be some confusion," he said, consulting his notes. "Ms. Victoria claims to have power of attorney, but the property records show you as the sole owner." I invited him in and showed him the eviction papers, the photos of Victoria's forged signatures, and the documentation proving she'd never had any legal claim to my house. His face went pale as he realized what Victoria had tried to do. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Merrill." She provided what looked like legitimate paperwork. I had no idea she was attempting fraud. "What would have happened if she'd succeeded?" I asked. "Well, if we'd listed the house and found a buyer, the fraud would have been discovered during the title search. She would have been arrested for real estate fraud. It's a felony." I shuddered, realizing how close Victoria had come to destroying her own life completely. Her greed had nearly landed her in prison, leaving Emma without a mother entirely. The real estate agent left his card in case I ever decided to sell legitimately, but we both knew that wouldn't happen. This house was staying in the family where it belonged. That evening, I sat in my garden among Michael's favorite roses, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I did it, son," I whispered to the gathering darkness. "I protected our home. Not for revenge, though that had been satisfying. Not even for justice, though Victoria had certainly received that. I'd fought for family, for the memories contained in these walls, for Emma's future, for the love Michael had poured into every room. The house felt like his again. Victoria's presence had been scrubbed away, leaving only the warmth and peace he'd helped create. I could hear his laughter in the kitchen, where we'd shared so many meals. I could feel his hugs in the living room, where we'd watched movies together. This was what Victoria had never understood. You can't steal memories. You can't forge love. You can't manipulate your way into a family built on genuine care and respect. She'd seen dollar signs where I saw a lifetime of precious moments. She'd seen an opportunity where I saw a sacred trust to preserve Michael's legacy. In the end, that difference in perspective had been her downfall. I pulled out my phone and decided to record a message, something I could share with others who might be facing similar situations. Looking directly into the camera, I spoke clearly and calmly. "People will try to take advantage of you when you're at your most vulnerable," I said. "They'll see your grief as weakness, your kindness as stupidity. They'll use your love for family against you." I paused, thinking of Victoria's smug smile when she'd first demanded I sign over my house. "But remember this. Dignity, patience, and truth are stronger than greed. Document everything. Build your case carefully. And never let anyone convince you that you're too old, too naive, or too broken to fight for what's rightfully yours." The garden was quiet except for the gentle rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. Michael's roses perfumed the air, a reminder that beautiful things can grow even after loss. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions of you. Your value isn't measured by how easily you give in to their demands. I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in months. "Know your worth," I continued, speaking to anyone who might watch this someday. "Protect what's yours, and never let anyone bully you into silence." Behind me, the house glowed warmly in the porch light, every window a beacon of safety and love. Emma's drawings were already decorating the refrigerator again. Patricia's coffee cup sat beside mine on the kitchen counter. This was a home filled with family who chose to be here, not predators who demanded entry. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, I concluded. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be their victim. It's standing up for yourself with grace and strength. It's protecting what you love without compromising who you are. I turned off the recording and slipped the phone into my pocket. Tomorrow, Emma would visit again, and we'd plant new flowers in the garden. Patricia had promised to teach me her famous apple pie recipe. Helen was coming for tea next week. My life was full of genuine relationships built on mutual respect and care. Victoria had gambled all of that away for money she'd never even gotten to spend. I taught her a lesson she'd never forget. But more importantly, I'd learned something about myself. I was stronger than I'd known, wiser than I'd given myself credit for, and absolutely worthy of the love and respect I'd fought to protect. Michael would have been proud.